Hello again, everyone. Tom Nagorski in the Cipher Brief virtual studio, here today for a conversation about the United States and Iran. The two countries have just held their highest level negotiations in years, an effort to get back to some arrangement that might halt the Iranian nuclear program. They spoke in the Persian Gulf. They've resolved to have another meeting in Europe at the weekend. We're joined today by Paula Doyle, Cipher Brief expert, former senior official at the CIA, who did a lot of work on the Iran front. And I guess, first of all, Paul, I'd be curious to know what you make of the tea leaves that are coming out. It's more than tea leaves, I guess. We've heard words like constructive, productive. And as I said, we've got another round to come. What's your understanding of where things stand at the moment?
So the good thing about where things stand right now, the three words that we discussed in context last time, I said, don't expect the Iranians to cave. They're in a very weak position right now. But the words that have been coming out from the Iranian side have been respect, dignity, equality. Their expectations of the meeting were to be treated with some respect and some dignity. And they got that as a minimum bar for entry and for a follow-on meeting. The good news about the meeting is that no matter what the content was, no matter what was exchanged in terms of the Omanis running messages from one door to the other, from one room to the other, we got a second meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a second meeting, there is enough to work with. And that's promising enough. The sides are super, super far apart, but talking is better than not talking. And I'm thrilled with that.
Right. There was one on the substance. Again, it's hard from one meeting and the reports that we have to know for certain. But there was one area that looked like, at least perhaps the beginning of some common ground, but you tell me, which was that on the critical question of whether a red line or just a starting point for the United States is the destruction and end of the Iranian nuclear program versus no, it's okay if as long as you don't have a weapon. Those were that latter. I'm paraphrasing President Trump and Envoy Steve Witkoff said as much. How important is that daylight? Is it daylight, first of all?
Well, weaponization is different from having an energy program or a nuclear medicine program. And the United States has never objected, as far as I can remember, going way back to the 90s. We have never objected to any country having a peaceful energy program, certainly a medical program. Every country has a cancer program, for goodness sakes, if they're a good country. So that should not ever have been interpreted as an issue. We shouldn't be talking about Bashir, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The president made clear before this round of meetings that this was about weaponization.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who watch nuclear issues, that's a super important distinction. Netanyahu's distinction has been total destruction a la Libya.
Right.
And I believe that the daylight on this issue is between the United States and Israel. It is not between now Iran and the beginnings of the United States discussions on the weapons program.
Right. And not to think I can paraphrase properly Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, I don't have to, because here's a quote of his just the other day. The deal is acceptable only if the nuclear sites are destroyed. I guess that's making your point, right? Otherwise, the military option is the only choice. Is there quite apart from, U.S.-Israel relations and politics, is there if the Israelis, of course, have shown a willingness and an ability to strike Iran and hit some of their, it wasn't a massive attack, but they hit some of the nuclear program last year. That must hang over all of this, right? A statement like that from the Israelis suggests that they may, as they sometimes do, take it down a military road themselves.
They have an impeccable track record with Iraq and with Syria. And
Meaning going after such sites in those
they have
countries.
blown up facilities in
Right.
Iraq, and they have blown up Al Kabir in Syria. And they did so on their own with impeccable intelligence, not
Hmm.
necessarily seeking permission, approval, or guidance from the United States. They have their own distinct approach to policy when it comes to existential threats.
Hmm.
And when Iran makes a repeated, enduring effort to say that their foreign policy includes the destruction of Israel, there's no reason in Israel for them to go, did you really mean that?
Right.
They don't have that conversation. That conversation is unnecessary, and so they plan.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cipher Brief's NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsedge.com.
Back to the United States and Iran now. What do you see as key elements, if there are any, to even an interim deal, which is being discussed as a possibility here? Let's take it side to side. What does Iran need or asking for here? I assume sanctions relief is a big part of it, right?
I think what we're hearing from Arajji after his statements, which have many audiences, to include his own bosses, or he won't keep his job, is that the talks are to be narrowly focused on nuclear in exchange for sanctions relief.
Mm-hmm.
For Iran, this was classic playbook 2015, 2014. He was on the negotiating team, leading the negotiations from time to time.
This is the current foreign minister, right?
Yes, yes.
Right. Right.
Very credible and very successful, as was his foreign minister at the time, keeping the U.S. and the EU and the parties to the JCPOA negotiation focused as narrowly as possible on the
Mm-hmm.
weapons program. And so I think we're right back where we were in 2015, where the Iranian going in position is narrow weapons in exchange for sanctions. And their
Mm-hmm.
view is, if you agree to this, I can't trust you on the raising of sanctions. And so they're going to play the same playbook that they played in 2014 and 15. That's what I'm hearing right now. I'm seeing replay tapes in my head.
Yeah. One thing that I guess couldn't be a replay tape is we're also hearing that the Iranians are saying we're not going to agree to something unless there's someone else we spoke with said resilience to this deal, because of course they made a deal in 2015 that less than 2 years later was just abrogated by a new administration. But that's the way we work, right? I mean, we can't. Can the United States make a deal here that is, change of government proof, so to speak?
Careful what you wish for is what I would tell the Iranians, because do you really want a treaty? Is that what you want?
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you what's involved in a treaty. Let's look at SALT. Let's look at START. Let's look at the verification treaties. Let's look at the intrusiveness that comes with safeguards in verification and inspections. Let's go there.
Mm-hmm. In other words, might be too much for them to, or more than they want and would
Hey,
agree to.
let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
were negotiating, I'd say, hey, well, careful what you ask for. Here's
Mhm.
what it's going to look like.
How about on
And
the
it is
U.S.
a treaty,
Right. Right.
enforceable.
Right. How about on the U.S. side then, in terms of maybe red lines is too strong a term, but if indeed the destruction of the entire program is not an American request or demand at the moment, what is?
So weaponization, there are certain kinds of things that would have to be put on put in the parking lot for discussion to include the enriched uranium, the stockpiles, where they are, the numbers of centrifuges, the types of centrifuges, the supply of hexafluoride. Where is everything? Where
Hmm.
is each facility? Don't play hide things like they're good at. Um, that would be on the weapon side, but don't forget also on the weapon side is the delivery capability, and this is where I am hopeful that the U.S. position on weaponization, you get to define that term, right?
Hmm.
When you define weaponization, it is also delivery systems in
Right.
my book.
Hmm.
And we've talked about this, Tom, a number of times. The real threat to the region, the threat to the United States, the threat to Israel, the threat to NATO are the longer range missiles.
Right. Right.
And so, um, as Arachji talked after at his press conference after the session in Muscat, you didn't hear him say anything about missile complex.
Hmm.
Um, on this particular topic, I think there's a lot of shaping and molding and opportunity for both sides to say, let's define the term. And
Right.
our definition, I believe, should include the missile delivery systems.
Which was not which was not a part of the 2015 arrangement,
Not at
correct?
all.
Right.
Iran wiggled their way through that with love in my heart for the Iranian people. The government was very, very good at wiggling their way through a very complicated process with a lot of international players and
Hmm.
saying, if we're going to expand this thing too broadly, we'll never get there. And so it was a very narrow agreement, which
Hmm.
left Iran with way too much capacity and capability, which is why we are where we are today.
And last question then, speaking of where we are, obviously the players are very different in a way. The Iranians may be the same cast of characters, but of course their country in many ways has been badly weakened. Their militant proxy armies have been pretty badly battered, and their economy is even by local terms there in pretty bad shape. And of course, on the U.S. side, it's a whole different. It was Barack Obama and John Kerry, and now it's Donald Trump and by all accounts Steve Witkoff. How much, in particular, does the Iranian relative weakness play into any of this?
I think it's exceptionally important. And that's why the words dignity, respect, and equality come out of Aranchi's mouth when he talks. He can't really sit down and have a thoughtful conversation with the United States if the concern is that we won't treat Iran as a partner in the negotiation if we're only going to dictate. And I think obviously we must have gotten through that concern because there's a follow-on meeting in Italy. It looks like it's going to be in Italy, according to some press reports. I think, though, that issue risks coming back to the table at any time.
Right.
Iranians are proud. They do best in private.
Hmm.
You can have really hard conversations in private. What we say in public will matter. It will determine the extent to which there is a follow-on meeting. And it does get back to, did I feel respected? Did I feel that I was treated with dignity? It is just part of the interaction.
Yep. Yep. All right. A lot to watch for. Really appreciate it again. Paula Doyle, good to see you. Always good to chat and appreciate your insights on the U.S. Iran question for the moment. Thanks again.
Thank you.